You wake up in Beijing, 1839, and for about 3 seconds you think, wow, what a beautiful morning. The sunlight filters through latticed wooden windows, painting perfect geometric patterns on the floor. The air smells faintly of steamed buns and incense. Birds chirp somewhere in the distance. Then, another smell creeps in. Sickly sweet, heavy, almost like burnt honey left too long in the pot. That smell is going to ruin everything. That's opium, the world's most glamorous disaster, wafting through the streets like a slow, poisonous perfume. This is the Qing dynasty. And not just any random Tuesday. This is peak Qing. The emperors sit on dragon thrones, swaddled in gold thread robes that would make Gucci look like Walmart. The empire stretches across mountains, rivers, and a coastline longer than your last Netflix binge. In the palaces, they drink tea so pure it could probably cure heartbreak, eat porcelain white rice served in actual porcelain, and watch performances so precise you'd swear the actors were born rehearsing. China is the place. The vibe? Old money, ancient money. The kind of money that doesn't even know what debt is. On paper, things look invincible. Tea exports are booming. Porcelain is the iPhone of its time. Everyone wants it. And only China makes it right. Silk is basically a luxury tax you can wear. Foreign merchants can't get enough of this stuff. The British especially are obsessed. They drink so much Chinese tea you could probably sail to London on the puddles of Earl Grey in their veins. But here's the thing about trade, it's supposed to go both ways. And Britain? Britain's got a problem. They're shipping literal boatloads of silver to China for all this tea, silk, and porcelain. And they're starting to realize they're bleeding money. Not cute, not sustainable. The British want a product they can sell back to China, something addictive, something people can't resist. And unfortunately, they've found it. That sweet, sticky, ruinous smell that's in the air, that's their business plan. Opium. From poppy fields in British-controlled India, packed into neat little bricks, sailed thousands of miles to China's coast. And oh boy, does it sell. The first people who try it, they think it's just a harmless little escape, a smoke to take the edge off, a floating dream where pain and hunger fade away. Then the dreams become the only thing that matters. People sell their clothes, their tools, even their children for another puff. It's that bad. And Britain's counting every coin. You're standing in the middle of all this, and it's weirdly quiet, not silent. There's the creak of wagon wheels, the bark of a vendor selling dumplings, the splash of laundry in a bucket. But underneath, there's this strange slowness. People's eyes are glazed, movements are sluggish. Conversations trail off mid-sentence. It's like someone put the whole city on low battery mode. Oh, and in case you're wondering, the government knows. The emperor knows. They've banned opium before. Several times, actually. It's illegal, technically. But here's the thing. Illegal doesn't mean much when the people enforcing the law are also lighting up on their lunch break. Customs officials take bribes to look the other way. Local governors pretend the problem's exaggerated. And the merchants, they're practically untouchable. Meanwhile, the emperor is in the Forbidden City, separated from reality by layers of silk curtains, eunuchs, and ceremonial protocol. To him, the foreign merchants are just petty barbarians, begging to be let into the glorious Chinese market. He doesn't realize the barbarians are already inside, and they're not knocking. They're building opium dens on every corner. Walking through the streets, you pass one of these dens. It's dim inside, lit only by oil lamps that make everything look like a fever dream. Men lie sprawled on low couches, their faces slack, lips parted, smoke curling from long pipes. The air is thick enough to chew. You catch someone's eye, or at least you think you do until you realize they're not looking at you. They're looking through you to some faraway hallucination. You step back into the street, blinking hard, like you've just come out of a nightmare. Here's the part where it gets extra ugly. Opium isn't just destroying people's bodies. It's hollowing out the empire from the inside. Soldiers get addicted. Farmers get addicted. Whole families disappear into debt because the breadwinner traded his tools for a few lumps of the stuff. The silver that used to flow into China for tea and silk is now flowing out, straight into British pockets, as payment for more opium. The economy is bleeding just like Britain was a few decades earlier, except now, Britain's the one holding the knife. And let's not pretend the British are the only villains here. Plenty of Chinese merchants are in on it too, smuggling it up rivers, hiding it in sacks of rice, bribing officials to lose shipments during inspections. If you've ever tried to stop a leak in a sinking boat with duct tape, you know what the Qing government is dealing with right now. Only in this case, the water's on fire and also addictive. You can almost feel the tension building. Commissioner Lin Zexu, the guy the emperor eventually puts in charge of cleaning up this mess, is writing furious letters to Queen Victoria, basically saying, "Could you not destroy my country?" Spoiler alert, she ignores him. British traders are getting richer every week. The addicts are getting weaker, and you're standing in the middle of the world's slowest car crash, wondering if anyone is going to hit the brakes. But here's the worst part. This isn't some dramatic, overnight disaster. It's not an earthquake or a flood. It's a quiet collapse. A boredom so deep you don't notice the decay until it's everywhere. People aren't screaming in the streets. They're lying on mats in smoky rooms, breathing shallowly, slowly forgetting what it feels like to care about anything. The empire isn't falling with a bang. It's being lulled to sleep. You take another step through the market, past stalls of glistening fish and piles of bright oranges, past a fortune teller sitting cross-legged with a fan, past a group of children chasing each other in a game that makes them shriek with laughter. Life is still here, for now. But under the laughter, under the smell of steamed buns, the opium scent lingers. Sweet, heavy, unshakable. And you know, deep down, that something is coming. Something big. Something that's going to wake everyone up, but not in a good way. Your job, if you can even call it that, is at a customs checkpoint in Canton, one of the few ports foreigners are allowed to use. The emperor's decree is clear. No opium, no exceptions. Sounds simple enough, right? Stand at the docks, check the cargo, and confiscate anything that looks like a one-way ticket to sleepy oblivion. You imagine yourself as a heroic gatekeeper, the last line of defense against the empire's slow decay. Reality? Not so much. The dockside is chaos from sunrise to sunset. The air smells like a cross between salt water, fish guts, sweat, and the faint caramel stink of the very thing you're trying to stop. Crates thud onto wooden planks, ropes creak, merchants shout prices in 3 different dialects. A sweating coolie shuffles past you with a sack of rice on his back, and you just know, there's probably opium inside. But the second you reach for it, his boss is waving papers in your face, stamped with an official-looking seal you can't read without a magnifying glass. The ink's still wet. Totally legit, obviously. Here's the trick with smugglers. They're artists, creative geniuses. They can hide opium in anything. Tea chests, silk bundles, hollowed-out bamboo poles. You once found it stuffed into dried fish, the kind that already smells like regret and rot. By the time you've finished prying the stuff out, you smell worse than the evidence. And that's on a good day. On a bad day, you're standing there in the humidity, sweating through your robe, pretending you don't notice the crate of ceramic bowls that clinks wrong when it hits the dock. The paperwork is endless. You write the same report every single day. Suspicious cargo intercepted. Estimated weight. Insert depressing number here. You hand it over to your superior, who reads it with all the enthusiasm of someone listening to a lecture on paint drying. Then he signs it, hands it back, and whispers that maybe you should be less thorough next time. Translation: if you want to keep your job and your kneecaps, stop poking around where the bribes flow. It's not just your boss. Half the officials here are in on it. You see them at night, slipping away from the docks with pouches heavy enough to make their belts sag. They've got new robes, new shoes, and a glint in their eyes that only silver or opium can buy. If you confront them, they'll smile, pat you on the shoulder and tell you to stop working so hard, because here's the thing. In Canton, the flow of opium is like the tide. You can scoop a bucket of water out of the river, but the river doesn't care. And then there's the addicts. You see them everywhere, hunched in alleyways, lingering near warehouses, lurking by the piers hoping for scraps. Some of them used to be dock workers, strong men with thick arms and steady hands. Now they stumble like their bones are made of wet noodles. Their teeth are rotting. Their skin is yellow. They don't even look at you anymore. They look past you, to some invisible pipe that's calling their name. Every now and then, a bust goes well. You find a crate, smash it open, and there it is. Brick after brick of pressed opium, wrapped in wax paper, smelling like death disguised as dessert. You burn it right there on the dock, thick black smoke curling into the air. People gather to watch, some with genuine satisfaction, others with barely concealed hatred. You know the merchants are calculating their losses. You know they'll find a way to make it back. And the British traders? Oh, they're the worst. They show up in their crisp linen suits, top hats perched like smug little crowns, pretending they don't know what's in half their cargo. Opium, they say, feigning shock. No, my good man, that's medicinal poppy resin for perfectly legal purposes. Then they wink. Literally, wink, as if the destruction of your country is just an inside joke between old friends. Some of them try to charm you, offer you tea, biscuits, maybe a little gift for your trouble. Others skip the act entirely, waving British East India Company flags like they're magic talismans that ward off Chinese law. And to be fair, sometimes they are, because if a fight breaks out between one of them and you, the British government gets involved. And the British government? They've got warships. You've got paper fans. Guess who wins? Your mornings start early, before the heat turns the docks into a giant steaming dumpling. You haul yourself out of bed, shove down a bowl of rice, and shuffle to your post. By midday, your back aches from bending over crates, your fingers are splintered from prying them open, and your lungs burn from breathing in the dust. And occasionally the faint opium smoke drifting from nearby dens. By nightfall, you're too tired to even eat. You just collapse onto your mat, staring at the ceiling, wondering if you're making any difference at all. Spoiler, you're not. Because here's the ugly truth. Every crate you seize, 10 more slip through. Every addict you see dragged away by the guards, 5 more are lying in smoky back rooms right now. Their eyes half closed, their world reduced to a pipe and a pillow. And every coin you take out of a smuggler S hand ends up in another smuggler S pocket before the week S over. You start to think about quitting, about walking away from the whole rotten mess. But then you remember Commissioner Lin, the one guy in this whole operation who actually seems to care. He's made it his mission to wipe opium from the empire. He's serious. He's angry. And somehow, you feel like if you leave, you're letting him fight alone. Still, it is hard to stay motivated when you see the same faces over and over. The same crooked merchants, the same glassy-eyed addicts, the same useless officials telling you to look the other way. Every day is a loop. The smugglers win. The addicts lose. And you're stuck in the middle, a glorified scarecrow on the shore, waving your arms at an incoming tide that doesn't even notice you're there. You go to sleep at night with the smell of opium in your nostrils. You dream of crates, of foreign ships, of coins spilling across the dock. And in those dreams, you're always running, after a smuggler, after a boat, after something just out of reach. You never catch it. You always wake up tired. And the next morning, you go back to the docks, ready to do it all over again. The people you deal with could fill an entire novel, and it wouldn't be a nice one. Every day is a parade of faces, some charming, some infuriating, some that make you want to scrub your brain with soap. The British traders are always the loudest in the room, even when they're not talking. They walk with the swagger of men who know they've got the upper hand, like schoolyard bullies who also happen to own cannons. Their clothes are spotless, their accents crisp, their teeth unsettlingly white. They'll stroll up to your checkpoint with a smile like they re-dropping by for afternoon tea. "Afternoon, my good man," one says, tipping his hat just enough to make it look polite without losing an ounce of arrogance. You ask to inspect the cargo. He gestures grandly toward the crates, as if he's just given you a priceless gift. Inside the crates, opium. Always opium. Wrapped in neat brown packages, sealed so tight they look like they've been prepared for some sinister bakery. "What's this?" you ask, even though you already know. "Medicinal goods," he replies smoothly, not even blinking. "For coughs and, nervous dispositions." You raise an eyebrow. He winks, and it is not even a friendly wink. It is the kind of wink that says, "You can't touch me, and we both know it." Then there are the middlemen, Chinese smugglers who work with the British, moving the product inland where the foreign ships can't go. They dress like regular merchants, carry themselves like regular merchants. And if you didn't know better, you'd think they were just here to sell tea or rice. But the glint in their eyes gives them away, along with the way they clutch their satchels like they're stuffed with treasure. They're more nervous than the British, always glancing over their shoulders, always ready to melt into the crowd if trouble shows up. Some of them try to bargain with you directly. "Look," one says, sliding a small pouch of silver across the table. "You didn't see me, I didn't see you." You push the silver back because Lin Zexu's shadow looms large over your conscience. He frowns, mutters something about stubborn fools, and disappears into the street. You know you'll see him again tomorrow, and then there are the addicts. They're not traders, they're not smugglers, they're the end product. They shuffle along the docks like ghosts, their robes hanging loose on their shrinking frames. You've seen them slumped in corners, half asleep, pipes still clutched in their fingers. Some of them used to be strong, soldiers, sailors, dock workers. Now they can barely lift their heads. You try not to look too closely at their faces because they are all starting to blur together, like one endless chain of people drowning in slow motion. Sometimes you run into foreign sailors who've picked up the habit themselves. They're loud in the taverns, their laughter too big, their eyes too glassy. One of them once leaned over to you, reeking of sweat and smoke, and said, "Best stuff you'll ever try, mate." You told him no thanks, but he just grinned and tapped the side of his nose like you were sharing a secret. Your fellow customs officers are a mixed bag. Some are honest, or at least they try to be. They work hard, they seize what they can, and they follow the rules. Others, you can smell the corruption on them. Not literally, although you wouldn't be surprised if it had a scent. They re the ones who always miss the big shipments, but somehow catch the small-time smugglers, the ones who turn up in new silk robes after a slow month, the ones who avoid eye contact when Lin Zexu comes to inspect the docks. Speaking of Lin, he's the one person you've met who actually scares the smugglers, tall, stern, eyes sharp enough to cut paper. When he walks through the port, the chatter dies down. He doesn't raise his voice, doesn't need to. He just looks at a man, and you can see that man as future collapsing in on itself. You've seen Lin tear open crates with his bare hands, toss the contents into the fire without hesitation, and then turn to the merchant responsible and say, "Pray, that's the last time." No one ever believes it will be. The dockside isn't all grim faces, though. There's gossip, there's laughter, there's the occasional shouting match that turns into a brawl. You've seen British sailors swing punches at Chinese merchants, only to have both sides end up in the water, sputtering and cursing. You've seen smugglers chased through the market, knocking over baskets of fruit and upsetting chickens. Sometimes the chaos feels almost entertaining, until you remember why you here in the first place. And the market itself is its own character. It's the backdrop to every encounter, the noise and color you can't escape. The smell of fried fish and spiced pork buns wafts through the air, mixing with the briny tang of the sea. Merchants shout their prices, children dart between stalls, beggars rattle their bowls. Somewhere, a street musician plays a mournful tune on a flute, almost drowned out by the clatter of carts and the slap of water against the dock. All around you, life goes on. even as the slow poison seeps deeper into the city. You've learned to read the crowd. You can spot a smuggler by the way he avoids eye contact. You can tell when a British trader is lying because he's smiling more than usual. You know which of your fellow officers can be trusted and which will sell you out for a handful of silver. But knowing and stopping are two very different things. Sometimes you catch yourself wondering if you re-becoming part of the scenery, another figure in the endless dance of buyers and sellers, liars and thieves. The faces change, but the roles stay the same. And no matter how many packages you burn, no matter how many merchants you interrogate, the tide of opium keeps rolling in. One afternoon, as the sun dips low and the sky turns the color of old gold, you watch a British ship slide into the harbor. Its sails are bright against the horizon, its hull brimming with cargo you already know will be trouble. On the dock, a group of Chinese middlemen wait, hands clasped, smiles ready. Behind them, a few addicts hover in the shadows, hoping for a scrap, a favor, a pity sale. You realize, not for the first time, that everyone here is playing their part in the same performance. The only difference is who gets rich and who gets hollowed out. And you're somewhere in between. Not rich, not hollow, just stuck in the middle, watching the whole thing unfold like a play you've already memorized. Night creeps over Canton like a slow spill of ink, bleeding into every alley and rooftop until the whole city is steeped in shadows. The heat of the day clings to the air, sticky and heavy, but the smell of the sea grows sharper, salt and rot mixing with the faint, sickly sweet scent that never seems to go away. Opium doesn't sleep. The docks are quieter now, but never silent. Somewhere out in the dark, you hear the dull plop, plop, plop of oars dipping into the water. Small boats move like ghosts along the river, hugging the shadows under the piers. Smugglers, always smugglers. They prefer the night, when the foreign ships are just silhouettes and the patrols are thin. You stand at the edge of the dock, peering into the black water, trying to decide if it's worth chasing one down. It isn't. You know how that goes. You yell, they row faster, and eventually the darkness swallows them whole. Once in a while, you do catch one. A flicker of movement gives them away, or a careless splash too loud in the quiet. You grab them, drag them in, tear open their cargo, and there it is. The familiar brown bricks, tightly wrapped. You smash them on the ground, kick them into the water, sometimes toss them into a fire if you have one going. And the whole time, you know there's another boat just out of sight, slipping past while you're busy with this one. The danger isn't just on the water. It's in the alleys that run like veins through the port. You've heard the stories. Customs officers who didn't make it home after a late shift, found days later with weights tied to their ankles, or never found at all. Sometimes it's a warning, sometimes it's just business. You've learned to listen for the wrong kind of footsteps behind you. Too close, too steady. You've learned to keep one hand near the knife tucked under your robe, not because you think you can fight off a gang of smugglers, but because it makes you feel less like prey. You have learned which streets are safe and which ones you rather circle the city to avoid. There's a rhythm to the danger. It builds slowly, like the tightening of a drum. You can sense it in the air, the way people glance over their shoulders, the way the British traders move a little faster to get back to their ships, the way the addicts disappear into the dens earlier than usual. Something is always coming, and lately it's been feeling bigger. One night, the sound of cannons splits the darkness. It's not practice. It's not a warning shot. This is the real thing. You run to the shore and see them. British warships, looming like floating fortresses, their masts bristling with sails and their hulls lined with black iron mouths. The first blast lights up the water in orange and white, and you feel the shock in your chest before your ears even register the sound. The Qing War junks try to meet them, but they're outmatched before the fight even starts. The British ships are sleek and fast, with cannons that can punch holes through wood like paper. The junks are slow, heavy, and armed with weapons that feel ancient in comparison. You watch as one takes a direct hit, splintering into a mess of fire and screams. The night becomes chaos. Smoke rolls across the water, carrying the bitter tang of gunpowder. The shouts of men mix with the crash of waves and the crack of cannon fire. Lanterns swing wildly on the docks as people run, some toward the fight, most away from it. You smell burning wood, burning cloth, burning something else you don't want to think about. And through it all, you know exactly why this is happening. Because you had the audacity, the sheer nerve, to try and stop the British from selling poison to your people. You destroyed their cargo. You enforced the Emperor's laws. And now they rehere to remind you what happens when you get in the way of someone else's profit. When the fighting moves further down the coast, the danger doesn't fade. It just changes shape. The smugglers are emboldened now, knowing the British will back them. The bribes come faster, the threats sharper. Even some of your fellow officers start to vanish, either because they took the wrong side or because they took no side at all. At night, the opium dens glow like warm embers in the dark. You can hear the faint murmur of voices inside, the soft hiss of pipes being lit. The addicts don't care about the war. They barely care about being alive. The world could be ending outside, and they'd just keep lying there, drifting. You walk past the dens with your collar pulled high because the smell makes you lightheaded, and not in a good way. Some nights, you're on edge from the moment the sun goes down. Every shadow looks like a smuggler waiting to slip a knife between your ribs. Every creak of the dock sounds like a boat bumping quietly against the pilings. The moonlight plays tricks on your eyes, turning piles of rope into crouching figures, the glint of water into the flash of a blade. Once, you round a corner and find two men waiting for you. They're dressed like dock workers, but their stance is wrong, too still, too alert. One steps forward, blocking your path, while the other smiles without warmth. "Dangerous job, working the docks at night," he says. His tone is casual, but there's an edge under it sharp enough to cut glass. You tell them you have work to do, try to push past, but the one blocking you doesn't move. Then, just as quickly, they step aside. "Be careful," the smiling one says, still smiling. You walk away without looking back, and only when you're halfway down the street do you realize your hands are shaking. It's not the kind of fear you can run from. It's the kind that seeps in, slow and steady, until you can't tell where your own nerves end and the city's tension begins. The danger is part of the air now, part of the water, part of the rhythm of your heartbeat. And the worst part? You're starting to get used to it. The war doesn't end so much as it slows down, settling into a kind of uneasy hum. Ships still pass through the harbor, fewer junks, more British sails, and the air smells of trade again, but not the kind you can be proud of. The opium flows like water now, not hidden in barrels or tucked under sacks of tea, but openly stacked in warehouses, loaded onto carts in broad daylight. Nobody bothers to conceal it anymore. Nobody needs to. You walk the same streets you once patrolled with purpose, but something in them has changed. The foreign flags hang heavier now, as if the city itself is bending under their weight. The old tea shops, the herbal stalls, the silversmiths, some are shuttered, others have been replaced by stores selling imported goods. You pass one shop window and catch your own reflection, framed between a stack of British textiles and jars of powdered opium. For a moment, you don't recognize the man staring back. The Emperor's decrees still arrive, crisp with official seals and bold in their language, but they feel more like whispers now. Orders to inspect cargoes, warnings to seize illicit shipments. The paper is strong, the words are strong, but on the docks, you see the truth. The British ships don't stop for inspection, and anyone who tries is politely waved off, at gunpoint. The law has become a story people tell each other, not something they live by. The opium dens are fuller than ever. You step into one once, not because you want to, but because you have to find someone. And it feels like stepping underwater. The air is thick, warm, slow-moving. Shadows move on the walls, shapes that might be men but might just be smoke. The people lying there aren't all poor. Some wear fine robes, rings on their fingers. They lie back, mouths slack, eyes glazed, drifting in a world that doesn't have war or politics or hunger. The scent curls around you, sweet and heavy, and you have to step out before it settles into your lungs. When you find the man you're looking for, he's outside, leaning against a post, blinking at the night like it's too bright. You tell him what you came to say, that his son was arrested, that there is still a chance to get him released if he acts quickly. But he just nods and stares past you. Later, you hear the boy didn't make it out. Not because of the law, but because his father never went to see him. The British merchants move with the ease of men who know no one can touch them. They laugh loud in the tea houses, walk the docks with chests puffed out, bargain hard for silk and porcelain, while their holds are already fat with the real profit. When they speak of the war, it's not with regret. They call it a victory. They say it was inevitable. They say it was good for trade. You stop believing the war was ever about trade. Trade is buying and selling. This was about something else. About showing that a gun can make the law bend, that enough silver can rot the roots of any tree, even one as old as the empire. Your own role feels strange now. Once you believed you were holding the line, that every brick of opium you smashed, every smuggler you drove off was part of something bigger. A defense, a stand, a promise. Now, it feels like you were patching leaks in a dam that had already cracked from the inside. The water was always going to come through. You just didn't know how fast. You start to see the cost in people, not just in numbers. The dock worker whose hands used to be calloused from hauling rope, now thin and trembling. The widow who sells her hair to buy a pipe's worth for her dead-eyed son. The merchant who once dealt only in tea, now keeping an opium ledger under his counter because the tea trade doesn't pay for his rent anymore. Some nights you walk the docks alone, the moon casting long shadows on the water, and you think about leaving. You could take a ship north or inland, somewhere far from the coast, far from the smell of the dens and the British flags and the slow, dull ache of watching your city change shape. But leaving would feel like surrender. And surrender, even in silence, is a kind of death. So you stay. You still seize what you can, when you can, even though you know it's drops in an ocean. Sometimes you wonder if it matters at all. And then, once in a while, you see a boy helping his father unload sacks of rice instead of crates of opium, or a young man who comes back from the brink, shaking and pale but breathing clean air again. Those moments are rare, but they keep you from walking away. The city will not go back to what it was. You know that. The British ships will keep coming. The opium will keep flowing. The dens will stay warm and full. But there is a thin, stubborn thread running through you, the refusal to let them have it all. They can take the harbor, the trade, the law, but they can't take the small victories unless you hand them over. Years from now, someone will write about this time. They'll talk about the treaties, the ports, the wars. They'll list the dates and the numbers, the names of ships and commanders. They'll write it like it was all inevitable, but you'll know the truth they wanted to bother with, that it wasn't just about nations and empires. It was about streets and faces and nights spent staring at the dark water, waiting to hear the sound of oars. It was about choices made in silence, and the cost they carried. The war might be over, but the fight is not. You are smaller in it now, less certain, more scarred, but you're still here. And in a city that is learning to look the other way, sometimes that's the only victory you can claim.